Once again, welcome, and we've got Phil Reid from Cradle Coast Authority with us today, and I think we've had every CEO of Cradle Coast for the last 8 years has spoken at one of our breakfasts, so it's a tried and true path for you today. Cradle Coast Authority, for those of you who don't know, is the regional body, and it covers 9 local government areas, so I'm sure Phil will tell you all about that. We're lucky to have him. He moved down from Norfolk Island, just moved to a bigger island really, and has been here around about 6 months, so he's going to talk to us today about regional priorities on the Cradle Coast. So please welcome Phil Reid.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Certainly don't want to let Business Northwest and Cradle Coast Authority down, given that we've had so many CEOs come through and deliver a presentation about what's important for the region. So I might need to throw my glass, and this will be a little bit of death by PowerPoint. The remarks earlier about AI, I'd like to say that CCA is a bit of an early adopter of AI. We are getting there bit by bit. We're certainly not as cutting edge as others. We aren't at the point where we're making caricatures of ourselves to the point like what we've got on those slides there, and certainly not putting ourselves in the model of Lord Jesus Christ like some prominent figures are internationally right now. So Ian did explain a little bit about the Cradle Coast Authority, and I think most people in the room would certainly know who we are. It may not necessarily be fresh for people how we're made up, so I will start to explain that the organisation, as far as I know, is Australia's only combined regional development and natural resource management organisation. So that is absolutely unique for this organisation. There are, I think, some 55 NRMs across Australia, and they predominantly receive federal funding to deliver a bunch of environmental initiatives, sometimes state funding as well. We're one of 3 in Tasmania, but we're the only organisation where regional development is coupled in that. And I think if there's an opportunity for me to change how the organisation operates for my time at CCA is to bring those 2 functions closer together, because we do see opportunity for how NRM can contribute to regional development and vice versa. We are jointly owned by the 9 councils in the region, and I will make a note at that point. We're very, very pleased to have Bernie back in the fold as of September last year. That's fantastic. It often gets said that CCA has 3 functions. So strategic services, which is services typically back to councils, regional economic development, and NRM. But in fact, we have what's called a letter of expectation from our owners, from our shareholders, around the functions that we're intended to deliver. And there's in fact 7 functions that we do under that letter of expectation, which is just going through a final phase of review. Regional economic development and NRM are obviously 2 of those, but we do see ourselves as a very prominent advocacy body for the region. So that's obviously advocacy back to state and federal governments. And we have, I have a slide on it later. We do have a set of regional priorities, and we're going through an exercise at the moment of refreshing those so that we feel that they're as contemporary as they can be. They speak to the true sentiment and the intent of the region and its growth aspirations. And we want to make sure that we do a really good job of that. We also are accountable for bringing together councils, so council cooperation, and we do often do that, particularly at that officer level. We deliver government-funded projects, and in fact later this morning, Ian and I will be joining Anne Urquhart in opening one of the 4 truck washers delivered for the Braddon Truck Wash project that's been going for a number of years now. Regional energy, renewable energy coordination. So that is an area of growth, as we know, in the region, but as of this year, it's still to be formalised, but we as CCA are being relied upon by our councils to be that coordinator for those projects and being, if you like, a conduit through back to councils but to communities before as they're going through planning phases in particular. And I mentioned strategic services before. That's going through a rebadge of shared services, but more or less the same thing. We have a board. Currently we have 4 independent directors and 3 council representatives, and some people may have seen that we did recently advertise for a Regional Economic Development Chair position, which closed on Sunday, so we expect there'll be an addition to that, another independent in the coming weeks or months. And we're an organisation of some 25 staff, so we're predominantly here in Burnie. A lot of our staff are NRM people, NRM officers, but we also have a staff member each in Strawn and on King Island. So I thought I'd open up a little bit about myself. You might be wondering why has this strange character come to live among you in the northwest of Tassie. Anyone want to take a guess the picture in the top left there, where that is?
Newcastle?
Newcastle, yes. So that's where I'm from. I spent most of my life living in Newcastle. Did my uni there, did my bachelor's degree. I've got an environmental science background. I did go on to do a Master of Environmental Law, and I've been doing some study in public sector management as well. But by and large, my family and I have spent our lives living in Newcastle. I did spend, well, before I jump to that, I do have a sporting background. I don't often talk to people about it, but when I reflect on where I am now, I'm a little bit baffled by it, because that was my life for right up until I was about 35, actually. So I represented my country, played over 300 games in the national competition. But eventually I worked out that, you know, there's things outside of sport, but sport is an excellent conduit to be able to meet people, to be able to network, and to be able to understand values such as teamwork and setting goals. So that is a big change for me to go from that sort of work to what I'm doing now. I did spend 10 years working at one of the 3 export terminals, coal export terminals in Newcastle, so I do have an industry background, predominantly in community engagement and environmental science and environmental management. And as Ian mentioned before, the last 6 years of my family's life we spent on Norfolk Island. So I did go over initially as the manager for planning and environment, but ended up being lucky enough to run the council for my sins. It's an extraordinary place. Tasmania does encounter some of the challenges, obviously, being an island, that a place like that does. But just to put it in context, Norfolk Island sits about 1,000 k's off the Australian coast. It's actually closer to New Caledonia in New Zealand than what it is to Australia. So it has remarkable challenges in being able to deliver services and being able to stimulate its economy. So primarily a tourism economy, very heavily government subsidised and funded for other services, but certainly a great community to live in. And if anyone hasn't been there, I'd recommend you take a trip. It's a fantastic place to see. There's a picture of my family there. Anyone want to take a guess, the picture at the top right there? That's Sisters Beach. So we've decided to live there as a family. It's a beautiful spot. It's just some of the coastline along here is just absolutely gorgeous, and we got an opportunity to take a photo there at sunrise one morning, and you might be able to make out a line of rocks there. That, as I understand, is evidence of cultural practice. I'm actually not sure whether I'm meant to show those photos. I need to ask someone to make sure that's appropriate, but it's just such a remarkable piece to have within your region. This sort of information people may have seen before, but I thought it might be important just to set the context a little bit. Myself, CCA, we can't lay claim to this information. This is produced by RDA Tas, so the Tasmanian Economic Review 2025. Really valuable information. I refer to it quite a lot. And it just shows some key metrics, obviously, for economic at a sub-regional or a regional level within the Tasmanian context. So gross regional product, local jobs, population, the unemployment rate, and tourism visitors. So it goes from 21 to 23, and I've been referring to this sort of information routinely, but pleasingly it does show, what I should say is, what I have noticed is that there is a tendency for the regions within Tasmania to compare themselves to one another, which is understandable. From me personally, where I see metrics going up for all regions, I think that is inherently good for the regions themselves. So in some cases we're seeing things sort of not accelerating as much as others within our region, vice versa. But pleasingly for the Northwest, I think statistics of note for me was certainly the unemployment rate. So post-COVID, or the period of 21 to 23, where it went from 7.5% down to 4.4, that's a really, really positive sign. At CCA, and I'll get to this in a moment with the next slide, we are very much focused on those core metrics when it comes to economic development. So jobs are a big part of that. And we will always advocate for projects that carry with them an employment footprint. And there's an opportunity for us to look at how we refresh what we see as regionally important projects in the region, which we're going through now. But that, given where the region sits, if you like, by way of its historic employment levels, I think that is an area of focus for the region, particularly for CCA. Also interesting to see that tourism visitors picked up so remarkably over that period as well, which is really a really pleasing statistic. And I just, from the same publication, decided to focus a little more on the jobs piece, but I guess what you see with this for the same, or for the 2023 period, and this is by percentage, so it doesn't give absolute numbers, but you do see that the agriculture and forestry area, mining, manufacturing, and certain areas around service delivery being very important for the region. Not unsurprisingly, mining does stand out for the Northwest compared to other industries or other sectors. But I think what the graph down at the bottom right shows is the change that we see from previous periods over that. And across the state, but certainly pointedly for the Northwest, that services, that jobs is growing quite substantially. And notably, education and training ticked up quite a lot over that period as well. So I'm certainly not au fait with the reasons for a lot of these drivers at the moment, but I would imagine things like having the uni campus was a big driver there, and we expect to see things like that grow with the Clean Energy Centre of Excellence, which we'll talk about in a moment. So, regional priorities. I mentioned before, we have a regional futures plan that sort of sets the basis by which CCA thinks and acts upon economic development in the region. It does consider things around employment, skills and training, and those inherent challenges of the region that we're in, having a dispersed population, particularly along the coast, but obviously those settlements that sit further inland as well. And hence why we are so focused on economic development that drives jobs growth, and we look at those indicators, and we'll be looking increasingly at those indicators that give us a sense of how we're travelling in that area as well. We do have a key priorities document which is a little out of date at the moment, and we're going through a process of refreshing that, particularly as we come into the federal election, because as I said, in the regional advocacy function, it's very important that CCA, particularly alongside its councils, takes a very clear position on what we do advocate for, that being government services and programs or projects themselves. But I did want to point to a couple of successes that the organisation has had in recent years, and I think when a lot of people, as I understand, hear about the CCA, they also think of the Shared Coastal Pathway. So that is a success of the organisation. It's not yet complete. I think a lot of people would know that. It's not yet been, we've not been formally advised. We expect to be hearing about that in the very near future, but we expect to receive some top-up funding from the federal government to uplift the existing pathway with things like amenities and signage. And we've also been earmarked some money to do a feasibility for a missing section of the pathway between I got it right, Howth and Wivenhoe. So we look forward to doing that work, and we'll be making hopefully an announcement sometime soon when that lands. The Clean Energy Centre of Excellence, that has been a point of advocacy for the CCA for some time, and obviously other organisations like Business Northwest, and it's really, really pleasing to see that project land and now get some momentum. As I mentioned before, that will be a source of jobs, and it will continue to build jobs growth within the region. We see that as really important given the projects that will be coming through in the coming years. Some other areas of advocacy that currently sit within our priorities document, we do see climate resilience and adaptation as an important challenge for everywhere, for Tasmania generally, but also for here. We do understand that particularly councils are faced with a number of challenges around climate resilience. Huge numbers of assets that will be under increasing pressure. Some councils are probably more advanced than others in considering the risk that poses and the funding needed to be able to particularly upgrade assets, but support communities in being more resilient. And we see ourselves as being a really important conduit to speak on behalf of those more regionally specific risks, and being an advocate and sometimes a body by which funding can come in and seek to deliver change at a council level for climate change. We also have a number of NRM advocacy points. We do stand by the Circular Head coastal wetlands as being a very significant wetland, and we continue to advocate for its recognition at an international level. Sustainability, or small sustainability grants for farmers. We see that obviously agriculture is a huge part of the regional economy, and we see that farmers need to continue to be supported to be able to exercise practices that make them more resilient to things like climate change as well, which I'll talk to a little bit later on. And fish barrier removal. So there are a number, I can't remember the number off the top of my head actually, but it's in the order of hundreds of fish barriers that sit along the number of rivers that we have along the coast here, and the risk that poses for threatened species, threatened fish species in particular, and sometimes the interaction that it has with water quality. So we've been fortunate in getting some funding, some preliminary funding to go out and do some work to identify the number of barriers that there are across the region, and hopefully put in some place some at least advocacy, but priorities for particular locations where those barriers could be removed. So that's work underway at the moment. And we also have a regionally important project function. So at the moment we have 4 regionally important projects on our list, that being Don River Rail, the Cradle Mountain Visitor Experience, the plans to develop that further, West Coast Renewables, and of course HIF e-fuels. So they are, if you like, major projects that we advocate for on behalf of the region to wanting to see those through. Don River Rail has received some $15 million, or pardon me, they've been earmarked $15 million. That's still to be formalised, like our shared pathway funding. But that is work to obviously bring that experience onto the main line, which they see, and I think the region sees as a tourism opportunity as well, which is really exciting. As I mentioned, we're going through a refresh, and what I'm really keen to do is to understand the process by which CCA calls for projects to be considered as regionally important. We want to make sure that that's a thorough process. We also want to make sure that we end up with quite a compact, easy to understand set of projects, and certainly not ask for the world at the same time. So over, I guess, the next sort of 6 months, we'll be looking at that process and working out how we make more public the call to have projects come in and be assessed in that regard. So just a couple of enablers and drivers that we see as important at CCA at the moment, and clearly housing is one of those. That came between 3 and 5 houses available for 1,000 rental properties. So it's next to nothing. A healthy rental vacancy rate sits at about 3%. We as CCA can't tackle a challenge like that just by ourselves, and in fact we've sought to work out where can we have the greatest impact through the good work that Veronica's done, as well as others in the organisation, to have strong relationships with major projects, particularly energy projects. we see that those projects offer, well, they can pose a risk, certainly a risk when it comes to regional housing, but they can certainly provide an opportunity as well. I don't have all the stats that we've got up, that we've developed in the last little while on those projects, but we've worked with an organisation called Summit Strategy very recently, and it's slated that I think at peak workforce for the number of projects that are at least being slated at this point in time, there would be some 2,700 workers coming in to the region. So that's not workers who already exist here, who are expected to take up jobs on those projects. That's people coming in. So it's an extraordinary number. We do expect some of those project timelines to shift, and perhaps one or two of those projects don't go ahead at all. But I think we counted up somewhere between 10 and 15 projects, particularly along the coast and on the west coast, between energy and mining at the moment. And if those projects are unable to find or deliver on their own accommodation, that will have huge impacts for the region. Equally, there is a trend growing, particularly amongst major projects, energy projects on the mainland, is okay, at one end it could be worker camp accommodation, quite call it traditional types of temporary accommodation for workers that get sort of built and then packed up later on. And that will be important. That will have a role for a lot of these projects, particularly ones that are more remote. But we do see opportunity for those accommodation needs to be delivered in a way for some projects that can deliver on lasting legacy, infrastructure or housing itself. There's some work that's been done by an organisation called Realliance, which is down the bottom here. Veronica's has engaged with those guys quite closely about what's considered best practice in that space. So it could be building of permanent housing by that energy or mining developer themselves, or it could be delivery of enabling infrastructure, power, water, that while it might be temporary accommodation that goes, it gives opportunity for housing growth down the track. We've been looking at a number of different models there. We pleasingly had a round table last Wednesday, it was, down at Campbelltown. It was specific to our region, but we made sure that we had it there so that we got all the important people up from Hobart, and it was a great day. We had great conversation, well facilitated by Kim Goods, where we considered the challenge, but what sort of mutual principles that we could prescribe to, or subscribe to, I should say, around how housing should be delivered for those sorts of projects here in the region. A lot of good contributions from proponents, the likes of ASIN, Hydro as well, for what's slated to happen at Lake Sathana, but we do see that there's other projects that have got some catch up to do there. So we are working towards having a number of those stakeholders to agree to a set of principles in the first instance on how that accommodation should be delivered in our region, and we're hopeful that we can get that over the line. But we're very much focused on trying to get ourselves some additional funding whereby we can do the strategic planning work and identify specific areas of land whereby accommodation could be delivered that will actually deliver on lasting infrastructure or housing for the community. We do see opportunity with that, so we'll be working on that in the coming months. I should also say the regional land use strategy is a big piece of work that we're undertaking at the moment. That will be the first major refresh, I think, since they were first drafted in 2013. That is, there's a discussion paper out in relation to that strategy I should point to at the moment. I can't remember the name of the website off the top of my head, but it is a state government website that you'll be able to find through its state planning office, which talks about the challenges and opportunities that will come into that strategy. But clearly housing is one of those, and the other one is industrial land. So don't want to sort of raise ire within the room, given that we're within Burnie, but I did put up a slide from the Mersey-Leven industrial land use study, which is the alliance of the four councils from Central Coast, Devonport, Latrobe and Kentish, to look at industrial land within their area and the opportunities that there are at the moment and potential for strategic rezoning, particularly where it makes sense. I feel that that's an area of opportunity for this part of our region as well, to really think strategically about where there's obviously opportunity for industrial growth. It doesn't need to be a huge industry, but where it is best positioned, where we can work towards those rezoning opportunities, that is where I feel that areas like Burnie, Waratah, Wynyard, Circular Head, as well as West Coast should be working to, and we want to be able to play a role in that in the coming. The knowledge economy, so data centres. For some people it's an opportunity, for some people it's scary, frankly. CCA is really intending to play an active space in that on behalf of the region. I mean, we are obviously, I think most people in the room would be aware that there's plenty of approval or permits being provided for Viridis up here. Things are getting huge, and the question remains, what is the opportunity, but what is the impact, particularly with regards to water and energy? While we have an understanding, or somewhat of an understanding, of how the technology is changing with the development of data centres, particularly around water and bringing down the necessary water usage, we believe there's a lot of questions still unanswered. We plan over the coming months to work with the industry, but with consultants, to better understand the variety of types of developments, so people in our region are well informed, particularly our councillors, because we expect that not all, but a lot of these developments, like what's happened here at Burnie with Viridis recently, will come through councils to seek approval. We want to make sure that our communities are well versed in what they are, what the opportunity is, what the impacts are that need to be managed at the same time. And I will just point out, the federal government has made it, if you like, their policy that for new data centres, presumably above a particular threshold, that when they come and develop here, that they are to bring their own energy. So you'll start to see this, what's the word that we use for that? Co-location, more and more. So it might be solar or wind and data centre, to be able to meet the demand, or the demand for energy to be able to run these things. Just a couple more slides. So I did want to touch a little bit on some of the stuff that we're doing in the NRM space. I mentioned before, obviously, the importance of agriculture to our region. And we feel that we wish to play an increasing role in making sure that we're climate resilient, our agricultural industry is climate resilient, but they're also looking for opportunity for other revenue streams for landholders. And people would have certainly heard about carbon markets opportunity through carbon credits, for example. That's been around for a long time. Another area which is growing is natural capital accounting, and it's an area that's not been sort of fully developed by way of its standards. There is a growing emphasis, particularly from the finance sector, on business being more attuned to protection of natural assets in relation to their operations. And in fact, for larger debtors seeking finance from institutional banks in particular, we expect that there'll be an obligation for them to go off and find how they may contribute to net positive gain of natural values through a market mechanism of sorts. So natural capital accounting becomes really important in that sense. And through some federal funding, we have been doing some work up at the Tia farm to do a demo in being able to understand the natural values that sit on that dairy facility, and follow, if you like, some of the preeminent accounting standards on how nature can be, a value can be put on nature, certainly, and be able to look for opportunities for markets for people to invest in the protection of that. For that particular demo, I believe we're looking more at soil and vegetation. There's things like water and threatened species and all that sort of stuff as well. But much like carbon, we do expect that there will be a growing market for investment into that, particularly driven out of the finance sector. And we have been doing a little bit of work with the likes of Harvest Moon on cover crop trials. So that's just some work at looking at, if you like, more sustainable, more climate resilient cropping practices, rather than trying to keep weeds out in the winter time, using cover crops, which gets nutrients back into the soil. We expect should be cheaper for producers rather than using lots of herbicides, etc. So that's proven to be quite successful at the trial scale, and we are confident that Harvest Moon are planning to do some more work in integrating that into their normal practices, because we're seeing them invest in cover crop species in the off season, which is a really pleasing piece of work. At that point, I would like to mention the report that we released last year, Local Power, Local Prosperity, which is the hard work of Veronica Terry, our Regional Economic Development Manager, over a number of months, or I should say longer than months. A lot of hard work being had with proponents well over 12 months in bringing together proponents in seeking to understand their challenges and the opportunities of delivering their projects themselves, but now increasingly for communities to think about the opportunity that comes with this wave of development. I'm certainly less qualified to talk about this than Veronica, so please ask Veronica any questions on this at the end of the presentation. But we've broken this down into direct, indirect and strategic opportunities, and you'll see some of the things that I've mentioned already. Housing is certainly in there. Knowledge economy and data centres is a strategic opportunity out of the development that we expect to come through the region as well. But certainly things around advanced manufacturing, we see that there could be an opportunity to grow that manufacturing capability in the region to support energy developments in particular. We know that that capability exists here at the moment, but we would like to work with the likes of TMEC and the industry more closely to expand that out, and particularly look at those opportunities as it relates to industrial land, where business could come in and support not just the construction, but the operation of those facilities into the future as well. Transport's a big one, and we also see tourism and hospitality as an opportunity. I know West by Northwest have Sam in particular has great vision when it comes to the opportunity that could come with, I think there's a term, industrial tourism, looking at the opportunity for tourists to understand the industrial footprint of our region and actually have that as a destination in and of itself. So that's an exciting part of what would intend to become of particularly the energy developments in our region. So that concludes my presentation. Just wanted to thank everyone again for giving me the opportunity to come and talk. I hope staff members don't mind me putting up a picture from our Christmas party. Yeah, we're down the road at Spring Street. We're always available for people to come in and have a chat about all things that we're involved in. We do have quite a number of Facebook and LinkedIn and probably Instagram handles that I'm not aware of, but from Cradle Coast Authority to Cradle Coast NRM and the Future Energy Hub. So there's lots of activity of ours for people to follow, and we really do want to increase our profile within the community over the coming months as well. We see that as essential to giving benefit back to the work that we do, and so if people see opportunity for us to, whether it's myself or Veronica or other people in the organisation, to get up and talk like we are today, then please throw us an invite. We're always happy to do that. So thank you, Ian.
Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes for questions, as Phil, myself and a few others have to head out to Minna Road to open the new truck wash. So who can I start off with? Susie?
Great presentation, thank you. I'm just wondering, what work are you doing with local councils in regards to planning and the housing?
Good question. So some of the work that we did in preparation for the roundtable that we held last week, we made a call to council. So first of all, we had a bit of a working group with many members of that being council officers, in some cases elected members. So they've in fact been part of the group that's been looking at this issue and the opportunities. We've made a call out to councils to, if you like, advise us of land opportunities or in fact existing assets where, in that instance, worker accommodation could best be sited. So I think we've got some 9 sites across the region, predominantly from Devonport through to Waratah Wynyard. Most of those are undeveloped sites. There are some existing buildings. And what I would say is a lot of it is privately owned as well. And we want to be able to engage closely with those private owners because it's certainly the perspective of councils that strategically the best position for some of these sites is private land. And at the moment, to be able to, for state government to facilitate that in a planning sense, they've got their eye more on publicly owned land. So there is a bit of a mismatch there, and we want to be able to engage closely with the private sector on that.
Thank you. I was thinking more along the lines of process with planning, because I mean, how we look at housing now is different how we've looked at it over the last 100 years, and with people importing, you know, drop shipping homes that are, you know, I guess that are equipped the district with smaller homes and ready-made homes. Is there any conversations around what that looks like, what changes or challenges that might happen within councils and more so in the planning division? So, you know, that expands their mind to looking at different types and styles and how housing could be emulated in the future.
So we're probably less engaged on things like medium density development, but I do know councils are very much focused on that, and we're seeking to draw light or bring attention to that within that regional land use strategy document as well. So that is, if you like, a trend from a strategic planning perspective.
Yeah.
From a planning process perspective, so going off and just getting a DA to build a home, we did some work again in preparation for the roundtable to understand how temporary worker accommodation could be stood up. That's more in terms of a mitigation on the existing housing stock. But we see relatively little impediment at the moment by which temporary accommodation could be stood up specific for a project, major project purpose, with, say, for a couple of tweaks which we've sort of suggested back to the SPA that would make it easier. So we hope that we don't need to wait on land to be zoned residential for there to be opportunities for particularly temporary worker accommodation to be stood up, because pretty soon these developments will be on us. And we would encourage councils, but particularly with projects become major projects and they go through TPC for approval, that that vision needs to be widened so that accommodation is considered as part of the assessment of that major project, because otherwise the project gets approved, accommodation's an afterthought, and then all of a sudden people are scampering to try and find houses within the existing rental market. So we see that the planning processing should already have the makings of what could tackle the problem, but strategic planning will hopefully come out of that regional land use strategy and will depend a lot on how councils themselves seek to apply their own housing strategies or development strategies.
Last question, Mike.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Philip. That was a great presentation. 3 areas I can see that you can have some fairly big challenges coming up, and with all the new job requirements coming with some projects coming up the Northwest Coast, I think skills training is going to be very important, not only for possibly workers that are coming in, but for homebred ones. I see a great challenge come up for the tourism industry, because I think those workers are going to take up a lot of the tourist accommodation. So, and tourism's starting to work really well, Northwest Coast of Tassie, and it'd be sad if that sort of detracts along the way. And one last one is we should be doing something with our airport developments, both at Burnie and Devonport, because I just don't like the big drain of all our Northwest coasters going through Launceston.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Just on that last point, I think I heard the stat during the Senate inquiry hearing. I'm going to come up with a silly number here: 400,000 passengers going from this region over to Launceston. Yeah, it's a lost opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity to present to that hearing, and we made a submission to that the Senate hearing on regional aviation services. It's such a critical thing. I mean, our chair, Ian Vanderbeek, and myself went to King Island last week, and I think people could understand how critical air services are for that particular community. I guess our current thinking is of the 2 airport model is essential. I know that King Island, as I said, is having air services and connectivity is important. There has been talk about other air services or reviving other airports across the region, perhaps at places like Stanley. We don't see that necessarily as a sustainable option for things outside of sort of more charter and bespoke services. We're very much behind putting the focus on Devonport and Burnie Wynyard. And if you like, from an advocacy perspective, we see good opportunity with RPT services, or what I should say is tourism travel in and out of Devonport if supported well. And we have had a meeting with Madeline Ablevie, and we understand that there has been some marketing money come Qantas's way to do a better job of marketing of that, which probably doesn't improve the cost point. But increasingly, and in relation to those major developments, Burnie Wynyard, I don't want to scare people, but if you've been to Western Australia, if you're where I'm from, I was part of the High Vis Army for a while, that, in my view, will become very much not just a corporate travel route. It will be people coming back and forth for those major projects that we see coming in and out of the region, mining included. So it will be a really, really critical asset in that sense. And we're seeking to better understand and advocate and support the owners of those facilities to get the money that they need to make necessary upgrades, which at the moment we understand is to do with things like security. And certainly take your point on those other challenges. Tourism is a major one, and we are working closely with West by Northwest on that potential impact to tourism accommodation of those major developments.
Terrific. Thanks very much. That's all we've got time for, folks. Thank you very much.
Our next breakfast is May the 21st, and it's talking about finance, treasury and risk management, and that's Matthew from Barrington Treasury Services. So you'll get inundated with advice on that in your emails over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Thanks very much, everyone.